Welcome to Modern Management of the Older Adult, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the MMOA podcast brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. I'm Alex Germano, and I'm really excited to be bringing you Erica DeMarch here. She is the founder and CEO of Step and Connect, which is a science-based company on a mission to make sense of balance and decrease falls. 20 years of experience as a physical therapist in the areas of neurorehabilitation and vestibular rehab led Erica to develop the patented Balance Matters system, a device based on science that incorporates sensory feedback to improve balance and gait. She is also the author of a children's book called How Do You Balance Like That, and developed an intergenerational balance program that goes along with the book. She also has a deep passion for learning and teaching. If you see on her Instagram page, she serves as an affiliate faculty member at South College Physical Therapy School. She's also edited chapters and textbooks for Parkinson's disease, and she has presented at multiple conferences and teaches both continuing education globally on the importance of incorporating balance and motor learning into exercise programs. Within the local community, Erica is also making a difference. She is on the medical advisory board for the Parkinson's Association of the Rockies, teaches balance workshops and group exercise classes for folks with Parkinson's disease and other older adults. She also collaborates with other therapists to serve her clients and community, and consults with 1 day a week at Wetzler Integrative Physical Therapy. So welcome, Erica. What a bio.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we're excited to have you here. And I wanted to bring you on. First and foremost, we are going to be talking about a product today. We have no affiliation together. This is just a product I personally have enjoyed using. And your resources I've personally enjoyed using and getting to know you over the past few years. So that's why I really wanted to bring you here and try to see if we can inspire some other clinicians with some new devices and some systems that are out there on the market. Yeah. So first question on my mind, given your bio, is how do you make sense of balance? Like, what's your elevator pitch to patients?
So I think balance, I just had this conversation with a colleague just before this podcast. And we were talking about, balance. People think, similar to how you guys talk about strength training, it's like this almost ageism. Oh, I don't need balance training. I'm older. I'm not old, they say, and I don't need balance training. But how I look at it is like, even if you look at some of these athletes and, professional athletes, balance truly changes your performance. It helps you no matter what sport or activity. So you can do what you love better if your balance is incorporated in it. And one thing I love to do, and like my pitch for balance training, is adding the sensory part with the strength training. So if you're already putting the time into bicep curls, can you do that on foam pads? Can you do that eyes closed? How do you integrate some of those sensory systems? So that's usually where I start with a lot of my clients. But then, of course, I go into the making sense. Like, I really try to push the sensory part. How do we get that sensory input to improve motor output? And once you get people trying some stuff, you kind of get them.
Yeah, you're really speaking to my love language there, because as much as like the, ICE and MMOA speaks to resistance training, I always like to bring in that sensory component if I can too, because I really do like to do a few things at once with as few exercises as possible. Like, we don't need to get crazy doing, a million different things. But if I could just have them deadlift on foam, maybe, or, like you said, with just eyes closed, those simple switches really make a big difference, I see, in my patients' outcomes with balance.
Yeah, and the research, I don't have it on the top of my head, but I can send it to you. There is some really good articles that look at functional gains. So if you're looking at functional outcomes, it actually improves adding that balance component versus just adding the resistance training that you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So can you tell me a little bit about what led to the creation of Step and Connect, which is the company that you are the CEO of, and then kind of in how did you end up creating Balance Matters?
So I think the product came that I eventually then did my own company. Yeah. So I was also a young mother at the time, as something falls behind me, not sleeping and just thinking a lot at night. And I was working part-time at a vestibular clinic, so seeing most clients with vestibular or neuro diagnoses. But one thing I worked on it, or how the Balance Matters came, was we're trying to decrease the visual dependence, right, for a lot of our clients. So people with vestibular disorders or neurological. But then I'm looking at Parkinson clients and I'm having them step 2 lines on the floor, or I'm using lasers on the floor. So now I'm making them take a bigger step. They're getting that awareness, but now their inner ear is not activated because their head down. Or I just did all this postural awareness exercises, and now they walk out the room because they're looking at their feet, and all that's gone. So I was like that mad scientist in my basement, like figuring out like what else can I do to improve that step length, get that proprioception involved. So I was playing with different textures, different sounds, and that's kind of how it came. I did do some, I was lucky as a student. I went to Boston University as a grad student, and I got to study in the Netherlands during my one of my last clinical affiliation. And the research I did was Project Rescue, it's been 20 years, but they looked at all different cueing. So they were looking at auditory, tactile, visual cueing. So that's always been in the back of my head since I was part of that project, or was able to see that as a student, like what other ways can we cue people? And that's kind of how that came, is like, and even the foam pads, that's why, I'll show you the different types of, but for vestibular clients, I would have them, go home, eyes closed with their feet in Romberg, right? Then I would be like, show me your exercise. And all of a sudden they were like, feet are wide apart. And that's what they were doing for a week. And I'm like, you just wasted that week. You could have been doing so much more. So how do we change that foot position, make it more objective to see progress over time? So that's kind of my thought process of when I was inventing the whole Balance Matters
That's
system.
amazing. And okay, I want people to see this system. So do you mind walking us through? If you're on the podcast, I would recommend you go to the Facebook group to see the recording. If not, she'll talk it through and you'll kind of hear, you'll definitely hear the mat itself.
And this will be a little surprise that I have to show you that I have that just fell behind me.
Oh.
So there's different colors coming soon.
Okay.
So basically it started, and on my website too, we did do research we could talk a little bit more at Regis University for Parkinson's for the home program, because it really did start for me trying to improve home programs, how I was explaining my idea, but how do you translate from the clinic to the home and be able to have a therapist monitor and kind of progress those exercises. So this was the first one that was invented. You can see the foam is a little easier to step on. I think this is the one that you have.
Yes.
And it has a clicker in the front and the heel. So 2 things that hopefully you'll see in the next year or 2 is I'm working on sonification sounds, and hopefully working with some of the universities to get different pitches. So different pitches and how the brain works left and right, forward and back, so that, because right now they're the same pitches. But you can take these out. So sometimes if you just want to activate the heel, or you just want to activate the toe, you can put it in. Or if you want that heel toe pattern, you can get the click click. So
yeah, I like the 2. I use the 2 very often just for working on that weight shift, right? Like heel to toe and getting people to distinguish that. So I like the 2. I like having them both in myself.
And then one of the times that I'll take it out is like, maybe if I really say that client, every time maybe you're doing strength training, right? Every time you get them in a good posture, they stop falling backwards, right? So and you're telling them, shift your weight to your toes, get your hips forward. It's a lot quicker to say, keep that clicker quiet. If you hear that clicker activate, that automatically tells them to shift forward.
That's smart. Okay, so yeah.
You can change those around based on what you're doing. So I'm talking to you guys because you do so much strength training, but like think of just rows, right? Doing some, with the pulley system or something, and everyone's even shifting to their heels every time. If you want to keep them grounded and say, I want all clickers quiet, your bottom's not moving. It's just isolating from upper extremity.
That's really interesting, because I use it a lot with like make it click. But you're telling people to keep them quiet, which is a beautiful cue to keeping that foot really well grounded on the floor. And like you said, just to eliminate that weight shifting with like other exercises, if you really wanted to activate like trunk muscles and actually just isolate like scapula for a row per se. Oh, exactly. That's really cool. I like the thought about like just like no clicking, just keeping the clicker clicked and don't let it go, and to hear that click again. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think use your clinical skills if you're trying to activate a ankle strategy or a hip strategy. What are you trying to work on versus that weight shift or keeping it quiet? So you can work on both.
Yeah.
So this was the first one. They have different tops. So this is a textured top, and it was used in research. You can kind of see. I'll bring it up a little closer. And then I'm having different textures. This is the hard thing you'll learn as a therapist who becomes an inventor. Different vendors, all of a sudden, they don't have that color, and now they do have that color. So I have to keep changing and learning different ways. So I'll show you one of the colors isn't in stock anymore, so I had to find having a new texture for it, but I'll show you guys. So this is the other one. It's a 3-clicker one. So I really do get feedback from therapists. I really do love when people tell me what they want to see improve, so we can improve the product. So this one, for some clients, this is hard to stand on. This is a challenge just to stand on here.
Mm-hmm.
So this one's really firm. So it's a lot easier to stand on, more somatosensory input because it's a firmer, denser foam. And now there's 3 clickers. So I actually even show, I think the lighting isn't as good.
Yeah, I can see it.
So now you actually can get the, right here, you can get limits of stability. So I even just show people, and I've even used a marker on some of them and put the triangle and say, this is where I want your weight bearing to be. If your toes go up, that's where, like, I don't have good balance because now my base of support is smaller. So really teaching, or if somebody's always on the lateral border of their foot, then they have to activate the first ray. So there's different ways to work on mechanics for here. This one I love to do for limits of stability exercises. So having them really working on their ankles and doing circles. So this would be, for my clients with dystonia, I tend to use this one more.
I really like that. Yeah. And so you go back to the textured one before. Are you having patients like shoes off on that textured surface? Is that helpful for somatosensory input for this population in particular, or in any population?
So anybody with a neuropathy, I would recommend to take their shoes off and to stand on the textured foot pads. If you're trying to work on just the temporal parts of movement, the timing or, that aspect of it, they can keep their shoes on. So it's really what your goals are.
Yeah.
But if they are, our somatosensory system drives our weight shift, right? Not a visual system. It does a little bit of visual, but how can we drive that? So I've had some clients like the texture, some not. My client with dystonia is a pure example. She's been treated for years with all these different therapists, could not walk on her grass, her carpet, could not walk barefoot without the dystonia. So we slowly got her used to different textures, and now she's walking on all different surfaces.
That's amazing. That's a really tough neurological condition to treat. So these are really good clinical tips for people out there seeing that.
Yeah, so it was just neat. And for her to be excited to walk on grass again, it was just like a fun thing. So you have the grass foot pads. I think I've seen you do some creative stuff with that.
I do. I like the grass foot pads a lot because I have a lot of people wanting to go outside. So I like the grass quite a bit.
And then, so you could they all are interchangeable. So, to put on, you could put this on top or switch it. Or even I'd keep them off sometimes to do different exercises, especially when I do just the first ray. I do a lot of stabilizations of just moving the first toe and having them activate the clicker, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
So that I'll sometimes take it off, or if I do any upper extremity reaching stuff, I'll take it off so they know where they are at first to get that input. And then there's 2 different foam densities. So this is level 1, level 2 back there. That's a purple one. And this, you can then change the surface for vestibular training. So, and this is a nice way to just tell your clients, I'm going to start changing all these sensories. So when you're on a hard surface, trying to get the clickers, that's all your somatosensory system. You're trying to figure out where you are in place, try to figure out those textures versus your somatosensory. Now you're floating more. You're not relying on the ground reference. Your eyes are closed. Now you could do stuff on here. So these are all the different textures. Like I said, we had to change a little bit based on our vendors and things changing overseas and stuff. So these are 2 new sheets that will be cut. So this is, you were the first to see this. This is a new yellow one. And you can see it's like little, my daughter calls it a honeycomb, like type of thing. But it's textured, but not as, a little bit different. So this is great for tactile differentiation, be able to step from one to the other. Can you feel the difference with your feet?
Yeah.
And then for any of your cognitive clients, I find the colors are a lot better to, if you have anybody with dementia or a brain injury. My first job worked at a brain injury, and I wouldn't say step forward with your right leg. I can say step to the red pad, step to the yellow pad. It's a lot more simple to be able to step to. And then this is the red one, which
I like the different textures. That's really great.
So then you could be able to step to different textures, feel the different ones, really get that sensory input. So that will be coming out next year.
That's exciting. So you're going to have those two colors, yellow and red.
Yeah, and if you have any other, I think they have orange, green, and blue. I'd love to do the colors that are on. I love Meg's the Clock Yourself.
Yeah, I was saying that would be like Clock Yourself. That'd be a really good one to have all those colors.
If you already had the grass, that could be your green, I was thinking. And then we would have blue, red, and yellow.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, nailed it. I'm buying these right after this call. That's great.
So that would be, and one thing that I find, I just did this with a client yesterday. I don't know how much you do this with your clients or your system, is how much to have the brain. So two things I talk about, and we talk about intensity, is speed, right? So the speed of reweighting of stepping from one surface to another.
Yeah.
So I actually take my time and I'm on a hard surface and then put one foot on a foam. Mm-hmm. I can be like, okay, I'm on something new and my body can readjust. So you can actually cue them to say, I want to hear that clicker go off really quick, hold for 5 seconds on the phone, then back to the clicker. So you can actually switch back and forth and just change and to have your brain stand on one. So like I'll have them on 1 foot on the foam pad and one on the clicker. So like for instance, we'll take these. This was an exercise I did yesterday in the clinic. So she had to stand, and I'll do it this way so that I'm facing you. And then I can talk about the mat a little bit. There's different measurements so that you, how big of a step. But if I'm on the clicker and I have to step quick on here, right? This, or even have 1 foot on here and 1 foot on here is really hard.
Yeah.
Because now their brain has to say, okay, this is on hard, this is on soft. How does this work? Now I'm back in here, get back onto that clicker foot pad. So you can do a lot of fun stuff of having their feet on different surfaces, switching from, here to this surface, so that you could do the whole 4 square, onto each different type. So they have to keep or different colors. So lots of creativity you could do once you set up. And then I'll show you this last part is the numbers. Yeah. So I've had some clients, I look at their step length and look at the difference between step initiation versus, fluid gait. It's going to be a little different. There's a lot of good research on that. But if I'm here, what is my stability to step from here versus, a small step, or can I step over something? So you can really be systematic and objective to say they hit the target and really have good stability at 18.
Yeah, I actually love what the map provides that people probably can't see super great from here, but there's numbers all on the side of it. It's very objective, which is so nice because you can set up some cones on the ground and have people step over it. And then maybe the next session you do it again, but maybe you put the cones closer or further than you thought. It's not exactly the same place or environment. And you kind of change, you make these little micro changes. So you're having trouble progressing step length because you're not exactly sure how far you're putting an object. You don't have that objective measure. So the nice part about the mat itself is there's measurements all over this thing. So you can literally set it up and say, I want your, to do a 6-inch step or a 12-inch step or something like that. And you can even give that to your patients for home program. And if they have one of these mats at home, which we can go into, that there's, an option for patients to have this in their home. When I've had patients buy it before, it's so nice that you can tell them exactly where to set up the foot pad. So there's no guessing, like you said, that they're going to do exactly what you want them to do outside of therapy, which I think is really important. And we don't get that great carryover with just a piece of paper handout,
And there's also for them to see the asymmetries, right? So some of our clients, they might not realize, oh, wow, that was so much easier. A 6 on my right leg versus my left leg, and how can I work towards working on both of them. So the symmetry of step length really starts showing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting outcome measure to use and record in our patients. And I believe it's been a while since I looked, but when I got my system, it came with a book that you had with it, or like a little like handout that talked about different objective measures that you could use with this pad. I think including probably step symmetry, like maximum step length, things like that, which not a lot of outcome measures like go into that with that much like, objectiveness to them. Like maybe there's like some qualities of gait they go into, but this, I mean, I really enjoyed just the information you give with the device. Talking about that stuff.
And I've come a long way with that because I initially had that. Now I have to see if you had that. So now I guess a year ago, I just started a course. So I have a certification course, but what I did was for everyone who buys the mat now, I realized you need a little bit of education with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just intuitive. I practice and use it now. So things just come to me and I realize you need an introduction. So part of that main course, I took out little parts of it. And now you have an introduction course that you can actually look at those videos and have it.
That's amazing. That's huge. Yeah.
And the research, I love the research. So I keep finding new stuff to use with it, new tests that you can use. There's like, what is your perception of your step? Like, how big do you think you can step? I do that a lot, and then turn them around and make them tell me where it is. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, I was like, now I show them where to step. So I have a whole data on looking at that. And then all of a sudden they're like, I don't think I can step that much. I was like, but that's where you said you can.
Yeah.
And we're missing it. And then I'm like, what happens if you thought you were, I had a client in New York who thought she can step over, she was visiting and it was like one of those locks that, where they come up from the ground, and she thought she could step over it, and her perception, she could, and she did, and she missed it, hit it, and fell.
Awesome.
So like that perception, thinking she can do more than she can, actually change the balance. So like making sure that matches on both ends. I think.
Yeah, and I think too, what's cool, you have it on the wall in the background of the video. If you can't see, there's a mat on the wall as well. So this thing can be put up, like high, low. I see you doing vestibular exercises with it and using targets on the wall itself. So like just the implications for the device are really vast. And we've mentioned a lot about obviously we speak to older adults a lot and like neurodegenerative populations, but are you using this mat across an aging spectrum, like with everyone?
Yeah, so I am, so I see a lot of vestibular clients, when I in concussion clients afterwards. So I do a lot of vestibular, and you can use, this is completely washable, everything. So I use chalk markers. Have you used so I'll put numbers, shapes and stuff, and then put it different than for them to be able to look, or they actually do it to give them autonomy. Like they can write a word out on all the different ones and then have to figure out how, like Wordle is so popular, pick a few letters and then they have to keep looking at how many words they can put, you could do
concussion population. That's an interesting one too. I'm just thinking about, some clinicians are not like me doing exclusive Jerry, where like I can see the value in buying something like this for myself because I could use it with a lot of people. Gait retraining, neurodegenerative, balance, vestibular, like can use it with everyone. But I think for a clinic too, who's seeing different aging populations, it could be beneficial as well.
And I'm working with my next year, you'll see more stuff coming out. I'm starting to meet with a lot more doctors and having them to understand what I'm doing, because we're a referral source, and for them to understand what their clients need. So I've met with some orthopedic surgeons and stuff and looking at proprioceptive training for knee replacements, for some spinal stuff. So like how are they including that? So you can put this underneath and do hip proprioception work. So having someone stand and hit all the clickers as they go around in one stance, like there's a lot of other stuff that you can do, including in there. Like I've done, isometric quad sets and put the clicker underneath and it had them. So there's some fun stuff that you can do.
I think once you start practicing with it, you start to see like the fun stuff you can do with it. It's hard to like just describe everything, because like really you need to get your hands on it and then start going like, oh, I can place things this direction. I can have someone in half kneeling on the clickers. Like I can, have them in a variety of different positions.
And I think it's a tool, right? So you're the clinician, and just like you would use a Bosu ball or something, this is a tool to help with motor learning, to help improve either the clickers are helping with the timing of weight shift or the speed of their movements. I tell a lot of clients, you exercise at your comfort level. So like, I want you to march, and then now I want you to march slow, and now I want you to march fast, and I want you to hear the different sounds. I want you to make 3 different rhythms, and then see what your balance feels the most stable. And then, so you can play around with looking at different speeds and things like that. We do for children, I got a grant from the National Parkinson's Foundation, the community grant this year. Yeah. So we did our first intergenerational balance program. So the kids and adults were on it, doing different exercises, learning about balance. And the adults and kids were doing long jump. A few of them were doing maximal step length, that were for safety, but the ones that could were doing, and then the kids were like, you didn't jump as far as me, come on, and pushing each other. So kids actually love doing obstacle courses, and my kids, love jumping and figuring out different things, jumping to each surface. And so there's a lot of fun stuff you could do.
Yeah, I like the intergenerational connection that you're fostering there. Because just the United States in general is not great at intergenerational care. And sometimes it makes me kind of sad through the holidays seeing my patients like a bit isolated during this time, like even kind of away from family. So I appreciate your work kind of trying to link together these generations. And I've also experienced some really good just engagement when the whole family does an exercise together. When I have grandkids and the caregiver and my patient doing clock yourself, and everyone's trying to beat each other, and there's just a sense of fun and gamification. And so that's really interesting. And so what kind of drove your inspiration behind the children's book?
My kids. So, I've tried to include my kids in my company as much as I can, as a mom. So they actually helped me. So the names in the book, let's say I have the book. I still have yours. You were to send to you here. So this is the kids' book, but it's basically, this was my daughter. So now they're a lot older than these pictures, but she has glasses and had a hard time on the balance beam when she was taking a gymnastics class in our local gymnasium and wanted to skip. Kids are smart, similar to any age, right? Hey, let's go to class a little late so she can skip that one. Yeah. And they're telling her to look down, but she had bifocals because of her eyes, and that was making her balance even worse. So I taught her tips about base of support, and they know the vestibular system and can explain it to you. So it's all based on the sensory system. So it's basically this cat, talking about an elephant. So an elephant, I'm a complete neuro nerd, and the Pacinian receptors of the vibration in the bottom of your feet, but they have the most sensitive. So they can stomp and warn miles away. They can warn another elephant that there's danger based on feeling the vibration. Oh, wow. And so how much more fun can you, when you talk about the touch, learning about an elephant or learning about a cheetah's inner ear is why they can watch their prey, right? So this is one of my favorite pictures on it. So they can run and their head doesn't move at all. So they can, if you watch a cool video, their bodies just move like this really fast, and their head is completely stable so that they can actually keep their eye on that prey and run at those fast speeds. So when I talk about it's why things don't jump for us up and down in our movement, we have what we call our inner ear, it's just a different way to connect with animals. So that's what the book is about, each animal, like the mountain goat, we talk about shoe wear, and talk about their hooves. So it's, and the seal, does anyone know why why a seal can balance a ball on its nose?
No. Why can't they?
It's their whiskers. So their whiskers are sensory, like our hand. So this is when you talk about anticipatory versus reactive balance. They make all these adjustments, and it's all these sensors. They can feel it and make these adjustments with their whiskers, just like we make adjustments with our hand or our feet. So
that's amazing. I think I'm trying to, thinking about aging, right? You're setting kids up for just learning a lot more about their bodies than they ever could, which is going to set them up to be better and more successful agers, probably, if they learn a little bit about this, connected to things they enjoy, like animals, and then, can get a better and greater understanding of how their body works, how their balance works. And hopefully that keeps them engaged in those systems for a lot longer. And hopefully we see less of them maybe in the clinic with balance disorders in 80 years,
Yeah, no, and they're competitive. So like when they had to close their eyes standing on one foot, like, they were like, whoa, this is hard. Like thinking that, that they were just going to rock every exercise. So
yeah. Oh, good. You got to put them in their place, sometimes.
Yes, especially my 10-year-old.
Yeah. You also mentioned, I think you're a fan of music in your sessions, right? Like, do you use a lot of music in session? And like with this auditory device, like, can you tell me a little bit more about how you integrate music into your clinical practice?
Yeah, so I started probably using metronomes first, and that's what the research that we did when I was in the Netherlands. So looking at feed forward cues, so like trying to keep up with that beat, right? Yes. But not everybody can keep up with that beat. So there's
struggled with that today with somebody. So this is hitting hard.
Yeah. So, and I was very lucky that I have a music therapist here in Denver. So learned so much from her. She worked at some of our local rehab centers and then worked. So not everybody has accessible, to have a co-treatment with a music therapist, to be able to have live music and be able to change that tempo based on that person's moving, or if you want that person to hold that position or a little longer, how does that? So she was teaching me a lot on how do I even cue. Like I used to just use 1, 2, and she's like, you need to have the word end in between. It actually helps. End 1, end 2, end 3. Because then you have this rhythm. So she understands it at a totally another level. I interviewed her on actually my podcast.
I'll make sure to link to that one. I remember that was a good interview.
And so I used the metronome initially, and the study that I worked with in the Netherlands talked about measuring someone's gait, and then they gave a whole protocol for therapists on looking at if you're trying to speed it up or decrease it, depending on what you're seeing. If you're seeing like destination versus if you're seeing, somebody with bradykinesia, and then at 10% up of like how you're trying to push the metronome. Mm-hmm. So what I thought, the metronome gets boring though, right?
It's like pretty monotonous, and it's the worst when I'm using it with a client. Then I go in my car and I plug in my phone, and for some reason, the first thing that always plays is that metronome. So I'm starting to drive to the next person, and like this beating is going off, and I cannot change it fast enough. So you're correct; it is a little bit obnoxious.
Yeah, but you need that steady beat. Some music doesn't have it. She goes into a whole thing of like emotions and stuff. So some popular music isn't good for some people because you don't realize all of a sudden it brings back this memory of when they were in high school. Who knows, whatever it is, So she actually developed some songs for me. We went over exercises, and then when I told her I wanted certain things to be accentuated, she added that music to it. So we have a music and movement program that we just launched this year that you can actually then use it with the mat, or even use it alone. I've had some therapists say they just use it with certain exercises. And then it will be coming out next year. I gave it as a gift to my clients because they were all asking me. I did a 15-minute video of all different music. So you basically have like a program that they can do that it's, stretching. It's a multi-component exercise program, but it's all to music. And then that's some different types of music with movement. So
did you say you had some videos too of you doing some of the exercises for home programs as well? Like how do you integrate like your system with home program?
So that's what I'm working on. Most people were telling me I have some exercises one-on-one, but then they have to stop and pull up the next exercise, So I do have that people then can compile, or therapists can kind of make their own with it. Okay. But what people have been asking is they just want to follow a 15-minute or 20 or half an hour video of just continuously switching from one exercise to another, almost like a class. So that's what I'm going to probably be doing more. I just did one. I'll be doing more for next year so people can then follow that. Yeah. And I think the music, you push people harder and faster and they last longer. So if you're marching, like I can even put the marching song, you're marching and switching back and forth. You're going to go a little bit faster, move more, get your cardio. Yeah. Do we have time? I'll put I could see if I can pull up the song, see if you can exercise if you want. But if you actually, I think the music just makes somebody just work a little bit faster or harder.
I totally agree. It's kind of like if you were to exercise without music, would that make you feel? Pretty awful, I think. So like, I love incorporating music for folks in session because it's just way more fun for everyone.
And then they try to keep up with the beat, like have the beat with it. So every time you hear that beat, I want to hear that clicker go off. So they're getting that feedback to say, I'm offbeat or on, or that side's not clicking as fast as the other. So that's one way that you can, and then you can start fading that away if you look at just motor learning.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. You in the end of your bio, you talked about some of like the community initiatives that you do. And I just love that sense of community spirit. I think for us to make some of the biggest, most profound change, it's not globally or even like regionally, it's like local. Like what can you do in your local community to make a big difference? So you mentioned being on like a medical advisory board, teaching balance workshops, doing group exercise. Do you mind like talking to the crowd about like how maybe you got involved in some of these things, places that you reached out to, just so we can kind of encourage folks to make some of this difference in their own community?
Yeah. So I was from New York City originally and then moved to Denver. And one of my mentors actually told me, I was working at the vestibular clinic but I did a lot of Parkinson work when I was in New York. So I said, I want to see clients with Parkinson's. And she's like, well, then you need to start reaching out, So I actually reached out, go to support groups. I think it's a great way to start. There's so many good, so the National Parkinson's Foundation, there's usually, so any kind of industry, there's stroke support groups, there's MS. So if you have a certain niche that you're interested in treating and looking at, go to the support groups, and I would provide a lecture of, the current research of what you should be doing. So I did one on balance. And then you get people excited, so I started to do that. I reached out to almost all the movement specialists and made lunch meetings with them and talked about, I still remember this one doctor who I have a really good rapport with now, but he was just telling his clients to sweat really hard. Just sweat and you'll be really good. Just like he wanted that high intensity, which is true, and get the neuroprotective response of aerobic. But I challenged him and was like, I think that's great, but they can get so much more. If you have a specialist, a PT that can look at their quality of movements and all the other things, not just sweating, like how much more. And then he sent all his clients to me because
you need both, right? Like, the sweating is good, but you need that coordination, neuromuscular control aspect to really drive some change.
But I think some of our healthcare professionals don't understand our expertise, right? So
Not at all, no.
Go to the medical, the doctors and, try to meet them for lunch or something like that. And I ask questions to learn from them. Dystonia was one of my questions that I had a hard time treating. So I asked as many questions I could to that doctor about it, so working both ways to show that you want to learn from them and they want to learn from you. But I would say support groups, starting with that. And then, I think it was pretty cool that on the medical advisory board, this is the first time that they actually had, not just medical doctors on the board, and realizing PTs and speech therapy, that we have also a great amount of knowledge for program development and things like that. So show your knowledge.
I know, right? Like getting out there, I think like the community, like the senior centers have been a fantastic place for me to start kind of diving into the community, see what's out there, do some classes, do some educational seminars. Those places always need extra hands and help too. So I feel like they're always willing to like book a lecture and stuff like that too. So absolutely, those are great options to get started making a difference in the community.
And one other recommendation, especially if you're doing any private or if you're doing smaller, that's been mobile practices or, private practices have been starting to show up more and more, I've noticed. I'm starting to meet with a lot of more concierge doctors.
I love concierge doctors.
So if you think about, they want their members to have really good care, and bring a workshop for them, like to say, here's a balance workshop or a screening. I've done balance screens for some concierge doctors and things like that. So they did kind of like a health fair throughout their own practice. So that's another audience to target a little bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And they're very cool. I like concierge doctors a lot. They provide really good care to patients because they have the time a little bit more with folks to do that. So that's a good community to reach out to. Awesome.
And that's one thing I've been kind of pushing, and my goal for next year for my company is to talk to more of these doctors. So like I have one doctor, he does grip strength for every patient of his, which is so cool. And I was like, well, what's your fall prevention program? And what about toe grip? Like, how can we do some of these like screening tools and then say, well, we have a whole exercise program for that, if it's impaired. So it's kind of neat stuff to show some of the current research and then what you can do.
Yeah, so you've mentioned a lot of big plans for 2023 for Step and Connect and Balance Matters. You mentioned some new products coming to market or different foot pads, new colors. Mentioned some exercise videos that might be coming out, some additional continuing education. Anything else in the pipeline for you? This sounds like you're going to be really busy.
So the continuing education, we're still trying to figure out live classes. So last year we did 3 live classes, was the first time that the class was offered, and it still has an online course. So far I think it's going to be Florida and Denver so far. But if there's other places, we're looking to, just fill the calendar and figure out how many we want. I think the only other thing is my Balance Up program. I'm going to run it 2 more times. So for the community grant, I had it for 3, so 2 more times but that's going to be local, and I'm hoping that can be a program that people then can bring to their facilities after we get some more data, that you can have like an intergenerational program that on the weekends the kids can play, with their grandparents. So I had a pair with grandparents, which was so cool because now they do the exercises together. They have a whole team that they can play. So I would love for more centers to be able to offer that.
Oh man, we can't wait to see some of the data that comes out of that after next year. So we really appreciate your time. Like, you are a busy person, and this kind of came together at the last minute, and I just so appreciate you being here with us in the community to talk all about this mat. It's been really fun to work with in my practice. I could do all the deadlifts in the world sometimes, but I just want to try new stuff, and I grabbed your mat for that reason, and I've really enjoyed using it and touch it multiple times a week because it's so effective and fun for my patients. So I appreciate it from for me to you. Really appreciate it.
And let me know for, actually my website's getting updated, and hopefully in the next few days it will be updated, but I have a new feature that you could, if you want a demo, I do a lot of virtual demos. So if some clinic or hospitals, I've done a lot of training online. So I'm happy to set up that if anyone's interested to kind of learn a little bit more.
That's awesome. Where else can we follow you and your work? Maybe like website, Instagram, where can we follow you?
So stepandconnect.com would be my website. I have a lot of blogs, some resources there, some videos, some free handouts that you can have. I think there's even a free webinar on there. And then my handle for Instagram or Facebook is also Step and Connect. So I try to post. And then I love when you guys share also videos, because it's great for people to see what other people are doing, because not all my clients want to be videoed. So I get into waves of when I have clients who do and don't. So
same.
It's great if other people want to share videos. That would be great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I will make sure to link everything that we talked about here within the community, and you guys can look forward to catching this episode on the podcast here in like the next week or so. I'll have it up for us all to listen to.
Thanks again.
So, thank you so much, Erica. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you and everyone else.
Thank you for listening to the MMOA podcast. If you found this helpful, please share with someone that could benefit. And if you're looking for more practical content to help you better serve older adults, head over to www.mmoa.online, where you can learn more about our free resources, our community, continuing education courses, and our certification. Once again, that's www.mmoa.online. Thanks for listening.